What do a medieval abbess, a Nigerian scholar, two Southern sisters who walked away from everything, and a self made millionaire have in common? Well, I will tell you. The first is Hildegard of Bingen. She's a 12th century Benedict Benedictine abbess who was like a nun. She built an entirely autonomous women's community against the explicit objection of the church, which we know was male dominated. But from within that structure, she designed this community for women, and she wrote theology, she composed music, she practiced medicine, and she communicated with popes and emperors, even though they told her not to. She did it anyway. Then there's Nana Asmu. She's a 19th century Nigerian scholar. She's a poet, and she's she's a daughter of a Sufi leader. Now, she built an underground women's education network across West Africa, and it's a system of traveling women teachers called Jaji, who reached women that couldn't leave their homes for education. So she created a movement within a movement in plain sight. Then there's the Grimke sisters, Sarah and Angela, born into plantation wealth in the South. They walked away from that comfort and they joined the abolitionist movement. And then when that movement told women that they had to stay silent, they walked away from that movement too. And they built outside of two systems simultaneously, the one that they were born into and the one that they thought would receive them. And then there's Madam C.J. Walker, the first self-made female millionaire, Black, in America. I must say that. She didn't ask the system for a seat at the table. She built an entirely parallel economic infrastructure, training hundreds of women, and created a network that functioned as its own sovereign order. Now, what they have in common is this. None of those women asked for permission. None of them tried to change the system. None of them tried to reform the system. None of them wanted to be chosen and be included inside the system. They decided to build something else entirely. And this is where we are, ladies. This is what I am calling you into today. Welcome back to the channel. I am Marjorie, and if this is your first time here, thank you for finding your way. I'm Marjorie Phoenix. I'm the founder of the Femunati, a sovereign order and incubator for women who are building outside of the system and writing new rules about how they live, lead, and love. So if you are a woman who is over the circular conversations about how this system functions, what it took from you, and what it continues to uphold against your interest, then this is for you. And I want you to pause the video, go to the description box below, and click on the Femunati interest form so you and I can have a conversation about this, all right? And before we go any further, if this kind of content really speaks to you, I want you to hit the subscription button if you haven't already. Please like it because it tells me that I can keep going and doing this work. And it also tells the algorithm that this conversation matters. So I want to tell you the real reason I want to talk about this because, over the past few months, since the beginning of the year, I have been talking a lot about the ancestors and the blueprints that they have left for us, right? And you can look back through some of my videos starting in April, and you will see from Women's History Month the topics that I've been talking about. And we can honor the ancestors, right? We can name the women who fought and built and protected and imagined worlds, right? That they would never personally experience. But we are at a moment where remembering them is just not enough. And we have to ask ourselves, what are we willing to fight for, to protect, to imagine, to create? And I was watching a reel on Instagram with Angela Davis recently, and she spoke about the responsibility of understanding that the work of transforming our communities, our country, and this world, a lot of times it's bigger than one lifetime. So, so many of the freedoms and the possibilities we experience today exists because people before us chose to build towards a future they would never see. We are living in their imaginations, right? And I believe that this is the invitation in this moment. And it's not really to carry the weight of the world alone and not to inherit struggle as this identity, but to recognize that every generation has a role in creating what comes next, right? So it's not about what did they leave us so much. The question is what can we learn from what they've left us and what are we creating that someone else will one day be grateful that it exists. And that's what I want to talk about today. And I want to tell you why I'm doing this, why I created the Femunati, not my founder's origin story with this beautiful, hero's arc, right? But the real story. And, 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, I found myself in my own personal reckoning after losing my job. Now, I worked inside a mission and movement centered organization. And even within that space, I could see the system at work. I can see the colonization of white supremacy and even patriarchy at play, right? And after I was let go, I went down this road that sometimes felt like depression. Sometimes it felt like it was an awakening, but it was actually more than that. It was an evolution. There was a version of me that had been building someone else's blueprint based on institutional intelligence, right? And it was causing an internal tension and a threshold moment in my life. Because here I was, I had done everything right as far as, as I was concerned, right? Everything that was asked, right? Everything that was required to have the American dream, right? I'm competent, I'm credentialed, I'm educated, right? Multiple degrees, I'm committed, I'm hardworking. I had shown up for movements and institutions and spaces that somehow still felt incomplete. So I had no choice but to do the necessary work to take me through that threshold. I didn't know where it was taking me, but if I was to survive this, I had to do it, right? I had no choice. So I'm not going to get into the details of what that was like because if you want to know more, you can look at my last video from last week. It was titled "The Most Dangerous Thing a Woman Can Do Is Imagine Again." Okay. And I'll make sure and link that in the description box below for you. Um, and, you know, this was the point I knew I wasn't going back inside that matrix. This system that has perpetually set Black women up for failure and waged war on women. A leadership in crisis a whole damn system collapsing. And that's when I started asking myself, who am I in this moment? I could see what's happening out there. I could also feel what's happening in here. Now, who am I in this moment? Who will I be for the time that is approaching? What is being imagined as a new possibility before there is evidence that it could exist? That's where I was. And those questions are what led me here. So I started doing some research, and this was not for me to gain more knowledge. I was over that, right? I could have easily thought about, let me go back and get my PhD. But I thought, no, 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 no. I'm going back into that mindset of the system, not knocking the PhD. I still feel this inner call because I'm a curious person and I love to learn. So if I do that, it's going to be for that reason only, right? But I did this research because I was looking for guidance and inspiration in what other women did during turning points in history, right? Women who didn't ask for permission, women who didn't wait around to be chosen. And when I started this, I um, um, launched or kicked off Women's History Month, really talking about Harriet Tubman, right? We all know her story. But if we sit back and look at it through a lens of now and what she accomplished, right? It's incredible. The courage, the boldness, the not waiting for anyone, the not asking for permission, and creating a network that liberated thousands of people without Wi Fi, without social media. You understand? Hildegard, right? She didn't ask the church to make room for her. She built a room. Nana, her story is so beautiful. She didn't wait for schools to open their doors to women. She made an educational women's movement. She created that. The Grimke sisters, they could have stayed comfortable in their wealth and fallen right in line with everything that was going on. But they chose truth over belonging more than once. And then Madam C.J. Walker, when they didn't want to include her, well, she said, okay, that's fine. She rendered them irrelevant and she started her own thing. These are the women and the stories that inspired me to build what comes next. Because when you think about it right now in this moment that we're in, women don't need another program. We don't need another coaching container. I'm not saying do away with them. What I'm saying is when we really think about what is the next step, it goes beyond just that. All right. So I probably should say women don't just need another program or just need another coaching container, right? Or just need another mastermind, right? We need something more ancient that speaks to the remembering of who we truly are, that many of us feel ourselves being called into. Something that functions the way all of those women functioned, the way that creates a sovereign space for us, where women are not coming in to be fixed. They're not coming in to build the next business. They're not, at least from a place of survival, right? But they're coming in to be witnessed in who they are already becoming and what is emerging. And that is the Femunati. So for me to get here, I had to be done being comfortable. And I want to be specific about what I mean when I say done being comfortable, because I sort of said that when my daughter said this morning, she's in her 30s, and she said that she's content. And I was like, ooh, don't say that. Don't say that. And we were going back and forth, and it was almost like she didn't like the fact that I told her, don't be content and comfortable with her job. It's easy, the money's good. So she's on her own journey. Comfort is a seductive thing. Contentment is a seductive thing. Being comfortable is that job that pays well enough, the relationship that isn't bad enough to leave, that version of yourself that works well in rooms that you're in, even though those rooms don't fully see you and value you. Comfortable is survivable. That's the thing. It's entirely survivable. But I don't think we want to just survive this time. I don't think so. Not the women that I'm talking to. The women I'm talking to, we want to create. We want to create from our divine center, because it is in there we can feel something bubbling and stirring up. And the women I'm talking to, the women the Femunati was built for, they have already hit this edge, right? They're like on that margin, or I can see right beyond the margin. Something in their life has stopped holding, or they can feel that it's about to stop, right? And the old ways of doing things, the old moves they would make, pushing harder, performing better, showing up, and, trying to get into the rooms, network so they can be seen. Those rooms, those moves are no longer available to them, right? Why? Because they've evolved past the systems those moves were designed to serve. It's easy for the system to absorb a woman when she's moving like that. Look at what it did to Black women. In I can't remember what year it was, but I remember the there was this big thing about DEI, and all the companies opened up. And we as Black people understanding the importance of this in workspaces, especially Black women. And I've said this, wherever we go, whatever spaces we go into, we are going because we want to make it better, not just for us, but for everybody, right? So it's this big movement. But what ended up happening some years later? That same system chewed us up and spit us out, saying we have no need for you anymore. Why? Because the need was hollow in the beginning. It was never honorable. We know this now. And we have always heard that this is the time for us to build our own, right? But what does that mean? Inside the Femunati, women are building alongside one another. It's a collective ecosystem where there's a mutual witnessing and the shared elevation of support, where the philosophy is when you rise, I rise, and when I rise, you rise, right? Building outside of the system means that we must recognize that the current system can no longer support us in producing the future that we're trying to create. For generations, especially for Black women who have been suppressed and marginalized by this power structure, we have been asked to succeed inside systems built on values that are in direct contradiction to our deepest needs. These systems have been built on extraction, competition instead of collaboration, accumulation, profits over people, individualism instead of collectivism, right? Building outside the systems mean we stop asking, how do we gain more access to what already exists? And we begin asking, what do we need to create that does not exist yet? And that is why that quote from Angela Davis really hit me this week in what she was saying. So this is what a parallel system looks like. In education, right? It looks like micro learning ecosystems, right? Community based schooling. It looks like what Nana did, right? Mentorship networks, knowledge exchange that does not isn't dependent solely on traditional institutions to determine who gets to learn, who gets to teach, what knowledge is considered valuable. It looks like women creating spaces where wisdom and lived experience and ancestral knowledge, entrepreneurship, and innovation are all passed from one generation to the next. In finance, it looks like women moving beyond individual wealth building and towards a collective economic power. I did another video on this, excuse me, a couple of weeks ago, entitled Your Financial Power Outweighs Your Voting Power. And, it looks like investment circles and cooperative ownership models, community funds, sovereign wealth strategies, where women are not only consumers in the economy, but they're architects of capital ownership and opportunity. And that is a big pillar of the Femunati. In business, it looks like creating enterprises that operate from different principles, where success is not defined only by growth and scale and profit, but by impact and sustainability, freedom, and the ability to create wealth without sacrificing your well being. It looks like women building companies and brands and institutions that reflect their values instead of, reshaping themselves to fit outdated models of leadership and success. In communities, it looks like intentional communities and networks where women are creating the conditions they need to thrive, shared resources, mutual support, collective wisdom, relationships built on trust rather than transaction. And not because women cannot succeed alone, but because isolation has always been one of the greatest tools of maintaining existing power structures. So you may think, why would I come into a container and want to build something around other women? I can do that on myself because that's exactly where they want you. And like that, you might get where you want to, but think about how much quicker and faster you will get there when you're not alone. And even in love, I made this a big part of the structure here because building outside of the system means questioning the narrative we've inherited about partnership and sacrifice and worth. Another video you can watch about this is when a woman stops abandoning herself. I'll link that one in this description box below. And I talk in real time about when a woman belongs to herself, when she chooses herself first, when she's committed and devoted to self before she is committed and devoted to anyone else. This means creating relationships that are rooted in freedom and reciprocity and emotional maturity and the belief that love should expand who you are, not require us to abandon ourselves. This is the work of building beyond the boundaries we were given. And with inside the Femunati, as you're building this isn't about escaping the world. It's about participating in the creation of a different one. Women are not just supporting each other's dreams, they're strengthening their capacity to build them. Some will create businesses, some will transform institutions in where they work. Some will heal families and lineages. Some will create entirely new models and frameworks that we don't even have language for yet. The point is not that we all build the same thing, but that we just stop building alone inside that system that was never meant to hold the full expression of who we are. So I built what holds all of this. I built a space for women to become evolved, resourced, and building together. Those are the other pillars. I built a space for women to imagine dangerously. The women who are building outside of the system, they aren't just looking at this one dimensionally. They're looking at this from the lens of their leadership, their relationship, their bodies, their work in the world, their lives. And in this room, there'll be women who have already done some deep work, right? And they'll come to deepen it further and to architect, what's next at a larger scale. Then there'll be women in the room who understand what's at stake intellectually and spiritually, but they haven't yet embodied it or built from it. So they'll come to do that work with women who can help model that, not as teachers or coaches, but as their sawera, who can midwife their next evolution. And there will be women in that room who are just waking up to the fact that they have been building from someone else's blueprints. They come to remember. They want to remember alongside women who already know what remembering feels like. We're not trying to save a rigged system or repair a broken institution. We are imagining and we're creating something new. So I'm currently accepting applications for founding members who will come in at a level that will give them access to the shaping and scaling of this. The women who come in now as founding members are the women who will help to define what this can become. So if you want to know more about what that means, complete the interest form in the description box below. And please understand that a conversation with me, this is not a sales call. I'm not going to try to sell you because there is an application and vetting process. Because I believe that the quality of the room depends on who is in the room. So this is not for any and everyone if you can afford it. So if you're curious and want to know more, let's chat. Also understand becoming a member automatically gives you free access to any and all workshops, labs, engagements that we have. And the next one is the Dangerous Imagination Lab. That's a 12-week cohort that starts on July 28th. And there's going to be more on that in the description box below. I will put the link where you can go and check out all of the details about that. So let me close with this. These women that I mentioned, Hildegard of Bingham, Nana Asmu, the Grimke sisters, Madam C.J. Walker, all of these women, they built outside of the system. And they didn't just do it alone. They did it with others. But they also did it from the center of themselves, of what they knew to be true. And I cannot forget Harriet, right? The woman who had nerves of steel, even when there was a risk, even when the world called it wrong, even when they were misunderstood and misread. They said, to hell with it. I'm doing it. And that is the lineage the Femunati is built from. So I hope to see you inside, because this is the work of remembering who you are before the world told you who to be. I'll see you next time.